Well, good evening. I am Bill Purcell, Director of the Institute of Politics, and it's my privilege to welcome you all once again to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. The Institute of Politics is a special place, we all believe, and here tonight, the IOP is bringing to life its critical mission of supporting undergraduates interested in politics and in public service. The IOP, in partnership with the Harvard College Republicans and Democrats and the Harvard Crimson, have collaborated on this special event that will showcase our university's political leaders with a debate on the issues confronting the two candidates who are running for President of the United States. Representing the Harvard Republican Club are Colin Motley and Jeffrey Kwong. Colin Motley is an economics concentrator from Lake Orion, Michigan. He currently serves as the president of the Harvard Republican Club and resides in Winthrop House. Jeffrey Kwong proudly hails from what he refers to as the best city in the world, San Francisco. As the former mayor of Nashville and a proud resident of Cambridge, that is a subject for another debate on another night. He's a senior in Winthrop House studying East Asian Studies and Government and is president emeritus of the Harvard Republican Club. Representing the Harvard College Democrats are Eva Lamb and Jonathan Hawley. Eva, a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is a junior social studies concentrator in Leverett House and is also the legislative director of the Harvard College Democrats. Jonathan Hawley, a junior history concentrator in Mather House, hails from Oceanside, California, and serves as the events director for the Harvard College Democrats. To introduce our panel of questioners and moderate the debate this evening, we are fortunate to have one of the Kennedy School's leading experts on the United States Congress, political parties, election reform, and an overall popular professor, Professor David King. Professor King, you know, is the author, co-author, and co-editor of 3 books focusing on the Congress and on public confidence in government. He's currently completing a book about political polarization in the United States. He will also introduce our panel of questioners. Wish the best of luck to our student representatives. And now to get the debate started, please join me in welcoming Professor David King.
Thank you very much, Mayor Purcell, and well, you have a lot of debates to watch tonight, and it's great that you're engaged. And we also welcome you back here tonight. The doors will be open again at 8 o'clock. So after this forum event is done, we will reopen all of the doors, clean it up, and reopen the doors at 8:30. At 8:30 for you all to come back in. Now, to help us delve into the issues that we have for our students today, we have a wonderful panel, and I want to introduce them to you right now. Jean Inman should be familiar to any of you who've grown up and been around Republican politics in Massachusetts. She was the chairperson of the Massachusetts for McCain Committee in 2000, and again in the 2008 presidential primary. Ms. Inman served as the chairperson of the Massachusetts State Republican Party from 97 to 99, and again in 2002. Welcome and thank you. Emma Lind is familiar to you all as the editorial chair of the Harvard Crimson, so you've certainly seen her name, and she's one of the phone calls I have to respond to when she calls, especially if you want a nice story. She's a history concentrator and a literature concentrator at the Winthrop House, and of course, the editorial chair at Harvard Crimson. And she'll also be asking the first question tonight. So welcome, Emma. Thank you. And one of our fellows this semester at the Institute of Politics, Governor Tom Vilsack, who served as the governor of Iowa, the great state of Iowa. And anyone in here from Iowa tonight? There you go. I always thought if you could take Harvard and put it in Iowa City, you'd have one heck of a university. It's a great place. It's fine here as well, but Iowa City is just remarkable. He was the first Democrat elected that position as governor of Iowa in 32 years and served as the governor of Iowa from 1998 to 2006. Governor Vilsack ran as a candidate for the presidency until he announced his withdrawal from the race in February of 2007. He's now a fellow here at the Institute of Politics, and he has a study group I encourage you to attend to find out about it off of our website. It meets on Thursdays from 4 to 5:30 here in the IOP. So welcome to all of you, and here's how the format will work. Our panelists will ask a question of the debaters. The debaters will be allowed 60 seconds to respond. If I or one of the panelists feel it's necessary, there's been a 30-second rebuttal. If I or one of the panelists feel there's necessity for a follow-up question, we'll allow some time for a follow-up question. Teams will also have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal to any of the questions that their opponents offer, any of their answers. And we want to do things differently tonight for questions from the audience. You'll notice that we don't have, as usual, the microphones. Instead, we'd like you to ask questions on these blue cards. And you'll notice that the ushers will be handing out blue cards for you. Please record your questions here and then turn them into the ushers. And around 7 o'clock, they'll hand me a stack of these questions, and we'll ask your questions directly. So we had a coin flip just before we came out here, and it fell in favor of the Democrats. So they will be making the first question. I'll try and stay out of the way, let the panelists do the work, and Emma has the first question.
Thank you. Democrats have typically been against the pursuit of nuclear energy, while Republicans have been inclined to support nuclear energy. What are Obama's plans for handling the potential hazards of nuclear energy, like nuclear waste? What is Obama's plan to address America's needs for energy?
Actually, Barack Obama has traditionally been much more cautious on the issue of nuclear power than has John McCain. John McCain has essentially put his eggs in two baskets, the first of which is committing to build a fixed number of nuclear power plants over the next 50 years. The second of which, you all know, is called drill, baby, drill. And so Barack Obama advocates a much more comprehensive energy policy that involves nuclear energy if and only if we can find a way to safely dispose of nuclear waste. Barack Obama, in his time in the Senate, has already sponsored legislation that would establish a much safer standard for transporting and storing nuclear waste so that it doesn't contaminate the environment and it can't fall into the hands of terrorists or any other groups who would want to hurt us. And so with Barack Obama, nuclear energy is part of a package, but it's part of a comprehensive package. It's part of a comprehensive package only to the extent that it's safe. John McCain, on the other hand, has committed wholesale nuclear energy without any provisions about what to do about the waste.
Thank
The
you.
fact is, when it comes to both parties, we have failed on nuclear energy. For 30 years, not a single new watt of electricity has come out of nuclear power plants, despite billions of dollars being funneled into creating new sources of nuclear energy. That is not excusable for either Democrats and Republicans. The fact is that Obama is a latecomer when it comes to nuclear energy. He has failed to address it in the past. He was originally against nuclear power, and now he's for nuclear power. So I think that's going to be a trend that we'll see come up tonight, and I think we need to address some of these discrepancies on positions.
And I want to take a quick time out because I've made the first big mistake of the evening, and that was I was so excited to get to Emma's first question that I overlooked the opening statements and therefore overlooked all the fun we had in flipping the coin. So we began with a nonpartisan question, and Jean will have the next question in just a moment, but let's begin with the Democrats' opening statement. And at the end, the Republicans will then have an opening statement, and then in the closing statements, the Republicans can choose either to go to first or last in the closing statements. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you. A great hero of our party, Hubert Humphrey, once said, "Freedom is hammered out on the anvil of discussion, debate, and dissent." So in that spirit, we thank the Institute of Politics for organizing this event. We thank Colin and Jeff for always being willing to stand up and discuss the great ideas of our times with us Democrats. And of course, we thank all of you for coming this evening. History will look upon the election of 2008 as a turning point. Fueled by war, dissent, and upheaval, this election will force each American to look within ourselves and decide the direction we would choose for our country. Over the next hour and a half, we will discuss a variety of issues in greater detail. But before we begin, I would like to touch upon a larger theme, one that frames this debate and defines Barack Obama and John McCain, and that is their vision. John McCain is a good man, but as Barack Obama correctly pointed out, he just doesn't get it. He envisions an America burdened by its past, whether that be a foreign policy that favors war over diplomacy, an outmoded economic system that has failed the middle class in the past and continues to do so to this day, or through the policies of George Walker Bush. a man whose painful lack of curiosity and seemingly endless hunger for misadventure on the world scene has alienated our allies abroad and disillusioned our citizens at home. John McCain's age is not the problem. It is his ideas that are old, and they will not revitalize and renew America. Barack Obama, however, sees an America defined by hope and change, and in doing so speaks to the best in all of us, our better angels and our optimistic nature. He speaks to the part of us that wants peace and wants to see our fighting families reunited. He speaks to the part of us that demands that our fellow Americans be taken care of and offered the opportunities to live and thrive. He speaks to the part of us that rejects the notion that government is always the problem and instead can be used as a force for good. And he speaks to the part of us that possesses the true merit of our being, that dogged devotion to the future and our refusal to shy away from a fight. This is the part of us that when confronted with a test of our resolve, such as a pledge to end our dependence on foreign oil in 10 years, does not scoff and ask why it can't be done, but instead demands how it can. That is the true American character, hopeful, always looking forward, dedicated to ourselves, each other, and our posterity. Barack Obama's vision for America will not be an easy one. It will require the full measure of our citizenship and the full strength of our determination. But just because the future is difficult to reach doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. Remember that it was a Democrat who many years ago challenged Americans to reach for the stars by reminding us that we choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Barack Obama and Joe Biden share this spirit. And over the course of this debate, we will demonstrate their and our party's dedication to change, sensibility, the American people, and the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the Republican opening statement.
Thanks so much. I love the Democrats' imagery already. You know, I'm coming into this debate as a college senior, and I'm really scared. Every time I talk to my mom, she's calling me and saying, Jeff, do you have a job? Jeff, do you have a job? When's your offer coming in? And I'm talking to so many seniors now, and they are afraid. They are literally afraid. Going to OCS, they cannot find a job. And I think that's a pressing issue for all of us in this room today. How are we going to find a job for all of us college seniors and all of you out there who will likely be finding a job later? Either we're going to continue down this hole or we're going to get out of this rut. And I think Obama is the wrong man at the wrong time. And John McCain is really the guy that will get us out of the rut. Unlike how Obama might frame it, it's not about the rich for support, it's about jobs. It's about oversight, it's about all of your futures. I come from Chinatown in San Francisco, where small businesses are worried about cutting jobs. Many of my family do own stocks, but they don't want to be double taxed on their dividends. Sure, my family will never make more than $250,000 a year, but many of them do work for corporations, and they don't want to be threatened by higher corporate tax rates. Yet Obama wants to increase spending, jack up taxes, impose trade restrictions, defeat trade deals, even take away NAFTA, a crowning Clinton achievement. The last time we did that, bump up taxes and churned out the tariffs, that landed us into the Great Depression. Obama is the candidate that says, no, we can't double the child credit. No, we can't stop taxing your dividends. No, we can't get more consumer-friendly health plans. And for a party that keeps on saying, yes, we can, there sure is a lot of fine print. But the reality is we are in a new world. China is not going to stop producing its cars just because Michigan union workers don't want them to. Brazil is not going to stop trading cheaper and cheaper raw materials just because Obama says no to free trade. Obama's worldview will bring Democrats and Americans back to an age of isolationism, and that's where we don't want to go. McCain offers a bold vision. He is a war hero. Every time I see that CNN documentary come on, I can't help but have tears gush up. He is a man of valor. He is someone that has served our country proudly, and I'm proud to represent him and to say that he is my candidate for the President of the United States. I can count out the piece of legislation that he has gone and delivered on his docket. I think we can say that, and Obama doesn't have anything much to prove for his years in the Senate. We can see a person that is going to move us forward or move us backward. I know as a job seeker, McCain's plan will allow our economy grow, not shrink. And I know as a teacher myself professionally, McCain will push for all our children to be able to read and add and subtract by 2014. And I know as a global citizen, McCain will lead us into a stronger America that ensures peace. John McCain is different. His wisdom and experience combined serves as a reminder that America's best days are yet to come. And we look forward to a great debate. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And turning now to Ms. Lind for a question. So, Ms. Inman for a question. Thank you.
And my question actually is a follow-up to something you've just mentioned in your opening remarks, and it is a free trade question. On balance, have free trade agreements worked for the U.S. economy? For example, has NAFTA helped or hurt the U.S. economy?
It's to the Republicans. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. It's great to have a Republican on the panel, and along with our Democrat and nonpartisan observer, it's great to be well represented at Harvard. I think, without question, free trade agreements such as NAFTA and CAFTA, and not just in the United States but elsewhere, including the European integration that we've seen to create the euro area, have been on balance a great success. Prices have fallen as consumer goods become cheaper, as labor becomes more mobile, as people are able to buy inputs from other areas of the world in order to supplement their own productive capacities and specialize. Additionally, I think that it's evident that incomes have continued to rise in the United States, and in addition to this, not only incomes in terms of wages, but also in terms of benefits. You know, the Democrats are going to cite to you how middle income wages have been stagnant over the past 10 years and scare you into thinking that this is Bush policies. But in fact, that's just reflected by the increasing number of benefits that workers are able to get from working in the United States. So it's made us more competitive, it's decreased prices, it's decreased costs, it's been great.
Thank you, Colin. And rebuttal?
Yes, we would have to disagree. CAFTA, NAFTA, and other free trade agreements are good in principle, but they are lousy in practice. And John McCain wouldn't make them any better. He opposes any sort of trade agreement that would insist upon workers' rights and strict environmental standards. The fact that such provisions were not honored in CAFTA and NAFTA demonstrates that these proposals have not worked. Barack Obama will have fair trade rather than free trade that will focus not only on the economic upside of free trade, but also ensuring with the WTO and other organizations that other provisions such as workers' rights and environmental standards are honored by other countries.
Thank you. The next question is directed to the Democrats and Governor Vilsack will ask that question.
Good evening. Recent job reports indicate that the country has lost 750,000 jobs in 2008. The issue of immigration is one that brings out passions and concerns, and I'm interested in knowing what Senator Obama's position is on undocumented workers and the impact that they may have, either plus or minus, on our economy and our country.
It's interesting you should mention Barack Obama because there was another politician who used to have a very sensible approach to immigration. And I think his name was John McCain, but I've been looking around and I can't seem to find him anywhere. The man who once made sensible legislation with our hero Ted Kennedy. That is the sort of legislation that Barack Obama supports. Clearly, we have a problem with immigration. We have a dysfunctional bureaucracy and a border patrol that cannot secure our borders. Those must be reinforced, and they will be in an Obama administration. But we also have to remember that we need immigrants. They are a vital part of our economy. They come here to work, they support their families, and we must allow them the opportunity to do so legally. That includes a guest worker program that would help individuals come to this country who just want to work. And for those undocumented immigrants who are already here, give them what Ted Kennedy calls a tough yet fair path to citizenship that will bring them out of the shadows and allow them to pursue a course that will allow them to work in the country legally. It does bring up many heated passions, but we must remember that immigrants are a vital part of our economy. They do the jobs that need to be done, and we must respect that and give them a legal way to do it.
And a rebuttal.
You know, I come from an immigrant family. This is an issue that's dear and near to my heart. The fact is that John McCain has been a maverick on this issue, and for those who are playing a drinking game whenever I say the word maverick, you can go on ahead. But you know what? He has been a maverick on this issue. Just because he has refocused and highlighted securing our borders first, that doesn't mean that he does not believe in comprehensive immigration reform. He still believes that. He believes in increasing H-1B visas for those out there who are lining up for one. He believes in increasing H-1B visas, increasing family visas, and I think that's where John McCain is a maverick in the Republican Party.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question of the Democrats, and the follow-up question will then, of course, give the Republicans time to answer as well. Does Barack Obama favor a national ID card system, and why or why not?
A necessary component of securing our borders would not necessarily be a national ID system, but a biometric tracking system. The 9/11 Commission report actually suggested this among its many recommendations. If the issue of national ID is strictly for national security, then it must take on a more focused and more nuanced approach, which would include using biometric data to ensure that we know who is coming in and out of our countries. The phrase national ID, I think, bothers some people. It's too xenophobic in a sense. If we want to talk about national security, we can do so, and a biometric system is the way to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think,
Response.
in all this discussions about immigration, we can get into the finer points of immigration policy, but I think the broader point is this. Barack Obama has said he believes things. He's said he supports certain legislation. John McCain has been out there advocating, creating, crafting this legislation. And as anyone who's taken Professor King's Politics of Congress class knows, there's a big difference between leading on an issue and simply following and saying you step in line with whatever the party believes or whatever Ted Kennedy believes. John McCain has been a leader on this issue since he's been in the Senate. He's from our border state. He knows how it works. And he's going to continue to lead on this issue when he's president of the United States.
Thank you. And on the follow-up questions, I hope you all stayed directly on point. So is John McCain in favor of a national ID card? Or
He
not?
supports electronic employment verification, but not national ID.
Very good. Thank you very much. And now asking a question of the Republicans, Ms. Lind.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a theme that you touched on earlier, and that is the American workforce. So, as we all know, Americans are dealing with an ever-challenging economy, an aging workforce, and, of course, shrinking job opportunities. What steps need to be taken in order to assure that we continue to have an able and available workforce?
It's a great question, especially now in the current economic crisis. A lot of people are worried about jobs, as Jeff mentioned in our opening statement. And I think what we need to remember here is two things. First of all, the worst thing that we could do at this point in time is raise taxes on the American worker. That would be devastating to not only the American worker, but also American businesses. That's why John McCain has proposed a cut in the corporate tax rate to put our tax rate from the third highest in the world down to somewhere in the bottom of the list as far as corporate tax rates go. And I think that's important for continuing to attract new businesses and businesses that bring jobs into our country. Barack Obama, on the other hand, despite his highfalutin claim that 95% of American families will not see a tax increase under his administration, has been talking out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. 44% of Americans under Barack Obama's plan will not pay any income taxes at all, and the other 56% of Americans will subsidize those other 44% to the tune of 15,000 tax credit dollars a person. That's not the way to develop an American workforce that cuts across all cleavages in our country, and I think it's important that we keep that in mind and keep taxes low to encourage job creation in this country.
Thank you. And the Democrat perspective.
Actually, I want to address what you said, Colin, because about tax cuts, because the most important part of creating good jobs in this country, I think, is letting workers keep their hard-earned wages. And so I don't know where you're getting your numbers, although I see a lot of johnmccain.com printouts over on your desk. But every nonpartisan analysis available, whether it's from the Washington Post or the Tax Policy Center or the Brookings Institution, indicates that if you're a middle-class family making $50,000 a year, John McCain cuts your taxes by $319, Barack Obama cuts them by over $1,000. I don't see why there's any benefit, but why there's any comparative benefit from John McCain compared to Barack Obama's tax plan for the middle-class family.
Thank you. And our next question goes to Ms. Inman, and this is directed at the Democrats.
And this question is about the bailout, which is prominent in most Americans' minds at this point. The government's $700 billion bailout package was intended to help to stabilize our financial crisis. In addition to Wall Street, this crisis has shaken investor confidence as well. How will your candidate ensure that the consumer will regain confidence in the market, in their personal investments, and in their future earning power?
The bedrock of the American economy is the American middle-class worker, and under Barack Obama's tax plan and economic plan, the bedrock of the American economy will benefit much more than it will from John McCain's plan. Under Barack Obama's tax plan, the American worker gets a much bigger tax cut than it does under John McCain's plan, which means that there's more money to invest. The budget is easier. It's easier to balance a household budget sitting at the kitchen table. And moreover, with Barack Obama leading the United States, we have a much better policy. He's much more willing to reach out to the rest of the world because we are in a global financial market. It is impossible for the United States to solve this crisis alone. It is impossible for us to go on. It is impossible for us to be led by a man to be led by John McCain, a man who has apparently questioned whether or not he'd be willing to sit down and talk with the Prime Minister of Spain, a member of NATO. Barack Obama will restore the international community's confidence in the United States, and he'll work towards a global solution.
I'm going to try to address the question, first of all, about the bailout. John McCain's home plan, which provides middle-income families who have been pulled into an unfortunate subprime mortgage to exchange their mortgage for a low fixed-rate income mortgage. It's a plan that's been proposed by Harvard economist Martin Feldstein, and I think a lot of support in the economics community. But on top of that, let's be real. Obama defines a tax decrease as a tax credit. So the 100 million people in this country who pay no income tax at all receive a tax credit under Obama's plan, and that counts towards his 45% or 95% of Americans who won't pay taxes. They already don't pay taxes. So to say that he's going to cut taxes on 95% of American families is false, and I hope we discuss it additionally this evening.
Thank you, Colin. I want to follow up this question, although it was originally addressed to the Democrats, I'd like to ask the Republicans a follow-up question related to the bailout and to how we came to this situation and your understanding of how we came to this financial problem. Was there too much deregulation over the last 15, 20 years in Washington with respect to financial institutions, or was it the wrong kind of deregulation? What kinds of regulation would you anticipate we should have in the near future?
Well, that's a great question, and it's weighing on a lot of people's minds, economists included. And in studying this issue, it's actually interesting. A lot of people use this deregulation thing as a red herring. In fact, all the regulations we've set down and all the regulations that were even offered were followed to the T. The problem is that we had the wrong institutions to begin with we were trying to regulate, primary among them Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are responsible in large part for what the current crisis has put us in. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at one point owned 70% of all mortgages in this country. They had touched it at some point, and as a result, 70% of all mortgages in this country were backed by the US government. That encourages a kind of greed and short-sightedness that is unprecedented in American politics, and that's why you haven't seen anything like this since we've now created Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back in the 1960s. So deregulation is not exactly the problem here. The problem is we created Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, allowed them to run wild, who were supposed to be regulating above all else since they were pseudo-government organizations. And so the deregulation is not the big issue. The big issue is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The deregulation is being used as a red herring, as it will be by the Democrats, and I think we need to refocus the debate where it belongs.
Your perspective?
Colin, if you want to talk about greed and short-sightedness, let's talk for a couple of seconds about John McCain's 3 top campaign advisors, all of whom were intimately involved with lobbying for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac just a few years ago. So if you're talking about greed, and short-sightedness running rampant at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I think you should look at the people who are advocating on Capitol Hill for Congress to abstain from regulating in that industry. But the basis of this crisis is the subprime mortgage crisis, and I want you to know that Barack Obama introduced the first federal legislation ever over a year ago to protect consumers from mortgage fraud. John McCain has done nothing on the issue.
Can we add something to that? You know, for the last few years, the Senate has been under Democratic control, and under all those regulations, the Senate Banking Committee is the one that is charged with oversight of the banking industry. And along with this trend of the do-nothing Congress, and we can follow the money, the banking industry donations to the Democratic Party has steadily increased, even surpassed Republicans the last 4 years. And look at where we're at, lack of oversight by Congress.
Okay, that was 15 seconds, and we'll close with 15 seconds from the Democrats, please.
Jeff, I think you know as well as I do that with as slim a majority as the Democrats have in the Senate right now, it's difficult to get anything passed. But remember that even if the Democrats have accepted contributions from the banking industry, look at which party has consistently advocated for deregulation of the banking industry, harking back to the Keating 5 incident, in which you'll recall a certain representative, followed then senator, named John McCain. Even regardless of where our contributions come from, remember that the Democrats have never advocated a policy nearly as lenient to the banking industry as the Republicans have.
All right, thank you. And for our next question, which will be directed towards the Republicans, Governor Vilsack.
Thank you. I want to direct your attention to a different issue. There are 47 million Americans tonight that do not have health insurance coverage. At any point in time, as many as 61 million Americans will not have coverage. We also know that while American spends more money for health care, it receives less in terms of quality. But one of the issues that's not being discussed in this campaign has to do with the financial gap between the needs of Medicare and the revenues that are coming in for Medicare. I'm interested in knowing what John McCain plans to do about that gap.
That's certainly a great question. Entitlement spending is out of control in this country. Some estimates say that by 2045, 25% of GDP will be taken up by Medicare and Social Security alone. Unfortunately, John McCain has been involved in these issues of trying to fix the entitlement program since he's been in the Senate, since he got into the Senate more than 20 years ago. He was part of the first 1983 Social Security patch that's gotten us as far as it has, and hopefully we'll have another patch coming up soon under a McCain administration as well, and he's put forward a plan to do that. Medicare is a much more difficult problem, obviously. The costs are much higher, and we're dealing with people's health. I think Senator McCain realizes that. He realizes that there are issues that we have to address there that are going to be politically unpopular. And I think throughout his tenure in the Senate, he's found a way to advocate issues that are politically unpopular. So he's advocated benefit cuts to certain people. Increasing the retirement age is another way to increase that. Dealing with preventative medicine, continued investment in IT technology, all of these things will help to decrease the cost of Medicare as we go forward. But fundamental reform eventually has to be undertaken. And fortunately, he has the experience to do that.
Thank you.
I'm prompted to wonder why in John McCain's 25 years of experience in Congress, he's failed to promote any significant piece of legislation relating to reforming Medicare and making sure that its income is approaching its cost. Barack Obama recognizes that the reason that the cost of Medicare has skyrocketed is because insurance is fundamentally a collective burden. As long as we have 47 million uninsured Americans, Medicare will face costs based on people who are falling back once they reach eligibility into Medicare and into emergency rooms. And Barack Obama, by making universal health care affordable for everybody, will reduce that collective burden.
Thank you. And I want to remind you all that you have blue cards for writing down questions. And have they been handed out widely yet? I encourage you to write the questions, and then if you have any more, send them on up. We'll get to them in a bit. Thank you. A question now to the Democrats from Ms. Lind.
Of course, healthcare is of great concern to all of us. How it's provided, how to deal with rising healthcare costs, and also how to avoid getting sick in the first place. And now we're increasingly able to identify risk factors for diseases like diabetes and cancer. Could and should healthcare insurance be treated like auto insurance, using criteria like obesity and lifestyle habits to determine people's premiums and copayments?
I don't believe that that's the case as long as you follow the philosophy that healthcare is a right for all Americans. And I believe that in the 21st century, in the wealthiest country in the world, there's no reason that it should be. The problem with requiring people to pay higher premiums based on higher risk factors is that the people who will need health insurance the most will be precisely least able to afford that care. And we cannot afford that because, as I've just emphasized, insurance is fundamentally a collective burden. Anyone among us who goes uninsured and who incurs catastrophic healthcare costs raises the cost of healthcare for the rest of us. Now, what Barack Obama does to address this problem, instead of pricing insurance on the basis of risk, is to emphasize preventative medicine. Currently, Americans spend about 25% of our healthcare costs on administrative overhead and only 4% on preventative medicine. By changing the reimbursement structure both for his new national healthcare plan and for Medicare, Medicaid, and the state children's health insurance program, Barack Obama will encourage strong investment in preventative care and change that problem.
You know, I think it's great that we can agree that adverse selection is a huge problem in health insurance, and that's why I'm completely befuddled as to why Senator Obama's plan continues to put false estimates for the cost of this, quote, healthcare right that he's going to institute as president. He estimates that his plan, which essentially allows people a company to either pay a fee or provide health insurance to its employees, which will necessarily result in the worst cases of additional costs that will be borne by these people with certain diseases being given straight to the government, which means that Barack Obama's health care plan could end up costing upwards of $180 billion a year. Adding that much to our national debt every year I don't think is responsible in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Motley. Any follow-ups? Okay. Ms. Inman, this is a question to the Republicans first.
Yes, continuing on with the healthcare topic, it is estimated that end-of-life care makes up about a quarter of our healthcare spending. What are your candidates' thoughts on the role of the individual's responsibility towards the common good? That is, should an 85-year-old go for a fifth hip replacement versus allowing those healthcare funds to go to cure a child's disease instead?
Fortunately, this is a question that John McCain prefers to leave to physicians. Unfortunately, Barack Obama prefers to leave it to government policymakers. In similar healthcare plans around the world, for instance, I, as a type 1 diabetic, would be unable to receive kidney dialysis after the age of 70 in the United Kingdom, and no matter what my physical condition, simply by government fiat. And that's the kind of problems you get into when you start doing a government-mandated healthcare system, as Barack Obama has offered. Not a government mandate, but requiring employers to offer insurance, giving a government option for health insurance. These are things that lead us towards the direction of those decisions that you mentioned being made by people in Washington when it should be a decision made between you and your doctor. That's why Senator McCain advocates a tax credit for the purchase of individual health insurance. It won't cover all the cost of health insurance for individuals, it's true, and we don't dispute that. But the thing is, it won't be too much farther from what you need every year either, because he maintains the payroll tax deduction for health insurance. So Senator McCain's plan gives you choice in what your plan is like, gives you the ability to negotiate with your doctor about what your treatment needs are, no matter what time in your life is, and maintains that kind of freedom and choice in healthcare that is so essential to making those hard choices.
I find it funny that every time the issue of health care for all Americans is raised, the Republican Party invariably responds by raising the specter of socialism. What Barack Obama's plan Barack Obama's plan does not impose a mandate on the individual to take any particular type of coverage. What it does is it creates a federal insurance plan and adds real competition to the market. Now, Colin will inevitably tell you that this is because it's run by the federal government, it's inherently more efficient. But remember that private insurers have administrative overhead rates of about 25%, Medicare 2 to 3%. Barack Obama introduces real competition and adds choice, not takes it away.
Thank you. I heard a couple of things in your responses that I just want to touch on because there's a distinct difference, or at least I think there's a distinct difference, and I hope that you can help to explain it. So this is not a follow-up question with 60-30. I just hope that you can, within 1 minute, each of you, help me understand whether or not you think that health care is a right, a firm right. Ms. Lamb, you said that it is, in passing, a right. And Mr. Motley, you mentioned costs and the problem of adverse selection. Mr. Motley, how do you define sort of the parameters or the outlines of this question, whether or not health care is a right for every American?
Well, it's certainly an important question, and this was actually raised in the last presidential debate. And John McCain responded, and I'll echo his response, that healthcare is responsibility. As Americans, it is responsible to get a health insurance plan so that if catastrophic costs arise, you don't have to fall back on the social safety net to pay for your emergency room visits. It's also a responsibility to make sure that when you get to the end-of-life situation, as Ms. Inman mentioned earlier, you're aware of what the costs are of your particular medical care, and you're ready to treat them in the case that they arise. But I think that the problem is, and again, I mentioned socialism not once in my response. I'm not sure where Eve is getting her accusations from, but the Obama health care plan was called by the New England Journal of Medicine symptomatic relief but not a cure. And that's exactly what it is. They'll try to put a patch on it and say it's introducing competition. No, what it's introducing is a fallback plan for the worst adverse selection patients to go into a government plan, which 2 to 3% overhead, if it's on $180 billion a year, that's still $200 billion a year the government doesn't have but will be obligated to spend under the Obama plan. So I don't think that it's a good idea to say that we need to do all of these things, and it's not socialism. I agree with that, but it's not smart either.
Thank you.
Colin, I'm a little bit curious as to what you think the most viable alternative is in a world in which John McCain's health care plan were the law of the land. I'm curious as to what you think the most viable alternative would be for those people who suffer from problems with adverse selection, who are more likely to incur catastrophic health care costs, and who are most in need of health insurance. Now, I know that John McCain's plan offers a $5,000 credit per family, but this is despite the fact that his own hometown newspaper points out that the average American family spends $12,000 a year for health insurance. John McCain would fund this by taxing the health care benefits that your employer provides to you. The best nonpartisan estimates that I could find suggest that this would would push about 23 million Americans out of their employer-sponsored plan and into the non-group insurance market, because non-group insurers cannot take advantage of the economies of scale that happen when your employer purchases health care for a wide range of employees. Those policies are about $2,000 more expensive. So I understand that you want that in an ideal world, Americans would purchase their own health care and be responsible about it. But as long as people cannot afford it and the government doesn't make it happen, I don't understand what John McCain's alternative for those people is.
Thank you. And for the next question, it'll be directed first to the Democrats. Governor Vilsack.
This debate has been focused primarily on domestic issues, and I'd like to turn our attention for just a few minutes to foreign policy and matters relating to foreign policy. And specifically, at the end of Senator Obama's first term, I want you to imagine that he is victorious. I'm interested in knowing whether or not there will be American troops in Iraq, and at the end of his first term, whether we will have a stable, secure democracy in Iraq.
I think it's pretty clear that Iraq will go down in history as one of America's greatest blunders. Instead of fighting the war on terror where terror actually existed, President Bush and his enthusiastic cheerleader, Senator John McCain, advocated sending troops into Iraq based on faulty intelligence, woeful misunderestimation, whoa, I'm starting to sound like President Bush, and no exit strategy. It's time to relieve our troops. The Iraqis have a surplus, they have security forces, and most importantly, they want us to leave. And it is time to relieve our fighting families. Over the next 16 months, President Obama would proceed with a strategic withdrawal while putting more pressure and more troops into Afghanistan, where the war on terror continues to this day. Iraq must become a stable democracy, but we do not believe that war is the proper prescription for that. Instead, Barack Obama advocates aggressive diplomacy to help stabilize Iraq. We do not want to live in isolationism. We want an active foreign policy that engages both our allies and our adversaries. It has been shown that the war in Iraq will not be won by military force, whether we're there for 5 years or if we have John McCain's way, 100 years. We must use active diplomacy and fight the war on terror where the terrorists actually exist.
Yo, John, that's old news. You sound like you're reading from a script from 2004. The fact is, 4 years have passed. Why are we still talking about failure? Why did we go into Iraq? War is wrong. The fact is, slowly but surely, things are settling down in Iraq. It is in not only our moral interests, but definitely in the strategic interests of the Middle East for us to succeed in Iraq. And we are not only concerned by Iran, we're concerned about our democratic allies like Israel. We need to succeed. And John McCain is the one that will see us through that. He has supported the surge. Obama still isn't able to admit that he was wrong on the surge. And I think on the issue of Iraq, there is only one path, and that is success.
I'm curious from actually both the Democrats and Republicans. I think the Democrats have suggested that there will be a withdrawal, but I want to know at the end of 4 years, will there still be American troops in Iraq? And I don't think I got a response from the Republicans on that question.
Democrats go first.
Okay, well, Barack Obama's plan, while it does call for a strategic withdrawal, it also calls for residual forces to be left behind to help secure Iraq. Again, I like to study the past because I don't know the future, so I can't tell whether there will be troops 4 years from now, but we can say that Barack Obama's plan does call for withdrawal, and with the help from the Iraqi security forces, it isn't possible that, yes, there would be no troops left after 4 years, but that, again, depends on what the future holds.
Look,
Thank
we
you.
still have forces in Korea, we still have forces in Japan, we want victory, and we want residual troops probably will be there for a while. But the fact of the matter is, it's irresponsible for us to have a timetable right now. It's irresponsible for the promises that we have made to the Iraqi people, that we will support you in your reconstruction, we will support you in establishing a democratic government. It is irresponsible to set a timetable at this point. I think McCain, as he said before, he would rather lose this election than the war. I think it is important to our national security that we see victory in this conflict.
Thank you very much, and thank you for how you're handling the follow-ups. It's very helpful. And we're also staying well within our time limits, which I also appreciate. And again, I encourage you to keep writing questions if you have some. We have some terrific questions up here. But for our next question, our panelist, Ms. Lind, to the Republicans.
During President Bush's 2 terms, he undertook several diplomatic visits to Russia. What is the nature of our relationship with Russia, and how do you see it evolving during a McCain presidency?
The fact is, no one wants to go back to a time when it was the Cold War. We want peace with Russia, but the fact of the matter is that they are aggressively moving in, whether it's Georgia, threatening other diplomatic allies, democratic allies of ours throughout Eastern Europe. The fact of the matter is that Russia is belligerent, it is aggressive, and I think this is one area of policy that both Obama and McCain agrees on, even though Obama has not been particularly strong in the Senate, especially as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, to press for Russia to get out of Georgia. But John McCain and Cindy McCain has gone over to Georgia to reassure the Georgians. We have to make it clear that we stand with the Georgians. We have to press for their admission to NATO and our security alliance, and we have to provide certain guarantees. They are our allies. They are crucial to our national security, and I think it is in America's best interest that we make sure that Russia develops, eventually, democratic institutions, and not someone that is a former KGB agent like Putin.
Make no mistake about it, Barack Obama condemned Russia's unilateral and lawless invasion of Georgia exactly as strongly as John McCain, and I'm very glad that we agree on that particular issue. But Barack Obama also recognizes that it is impossible for the United States to retain moral credibility in condemning one nation's unilateral invasion of another when we have failed to rectify our unilateral invasion of Iraq in defiance of the United Nations policy. Barack Obama will work to democratize Russia, but we will also work with Russia and not simply shout slogans at them from across the Bering Strait.
Thank you. The next question is served up to the Democrats by Ms. Inman.
Continuing on the foreign relations theme, how about America's relationship with other world leaders like Presidents Castro, Chavez, Morales, or the Middle East more in general?
The key to a Barack Obama foreign policy is diplomacy, active diplomacy, aggressive diplomacy. As we move into the 21st century with a global community, we must use diplomacy. That's what grown-ups do. They talk to each other and they resolve their differences through discussion. And John McCain likes to point out that Barack Obama would agree to sit down with President Ahmadinejad without preconditions. The purpose of diplomacy is to discuss the things we disagree on. That is what diplomacy is, and so preconditions would not help diplomacy. We must sit down with these world leaders. It's true that the United States does have adversaries in the world. Obviously, President Castro has been a thorn in the United States' side for 50 years, and President Chavez isn't much better. But just because they may shout things at us does not mean that we should use aggression where none is called for. This is a time for leadership on the world stage, and this is a time for diplomacy. The case of North Korea showed that diplomacy works. During the presidencies of both President Bushes, there was isolationism and a lack of diplomacy with North Korea, and that's when they developed their nuclear weapons. No nuclear developments occurred during President Clinton's plan. John McCain thought war with North Korea was inevitable at that time, but President Clinton showed that in the 21st century, diplomacy does work, and it does work with our adversaries.
I don't like John McCain's position being mischaracterized as somehow belligerent towards adversaries. Of course we're going to sit down, but yes, we want preconditions such as, oh, I don't know, the Holocaust actually happened, or I don't know, Raul Castro, it's bad for you to capture and hold 41 Marines in your country for a while and not let them go. That's the kind of preconditions that are sensible, and any sensible, non-naive person can realize we should have those when we sit down with world leaders. We have to have smart discussions with them that actually get something accomplished. We don't want just a show and tell with Raul Castro and Hugo Chavez. We want substantial things accomplished. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to have preconditions. And Barack Obama's failure to recognize that is a characteristic flaw of his lack of experience.
Thank you. And a question to the Republicans from Governor Vilsack.
I want to talk about the other branch of government that is so important to our democracy, the third branch, and the fact that the legacy of a president or an administration lasts significantly longer than the 4-year term or 8-year term, and that one of the most influential legacies is Supreme Court nominees. During the next 4 years, the next president will have the responsibility and perhaps the ability to choose up to 3 justices. I'm interested in knowing what Senator McCain's criteria will be in making those selections.
Well, I know it's sort of probably almost up there with maverick as far as things people hate to hear in debates, but I think the answer is a strict constructionist, someone who interprets the law but doesn't try to legislate from the bench. And I think that's important. It sounds like empty words. People like to mischaracterize it as some euphemism for super conservative dudes like Antonin Scalia or something like that. But really, John McCain means it. I mean, look at the justices who are on the court right now. Many of them who have supported gay rights, have supported a woman's ability to have an abortion. These were justices appointed by Republican presidents. And I think Senator McCain will follow in that tradition of appointing people who interpret the Constitution but don't try to legislate from the bench. And I think that it is important because it's going to be a legacy of any president that decides to appoint any sort of justice. And I think that it's something that Senator McCain recognizes they'll have to agree on with the Democratic Congress as well. That's one thing. You look at the Supreme Court. If you'd like to have the Supreme Court making decisions that are more in tune in line with what the country desires and not just some anachronistic idea that they have about a living, breathing document, it's important that you realize that a compromise between McCain and a Democratic administration on a Supreme Court nominee is likely to be a lot more reasonable than anything a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress will come up with together.
Calling the Constitution a living, breathing document, I don't think that should be a cause for whimsy. I think that should be a cause for celebration. The framers made the Constitution so it could be amended. It can change, and it must change to reflect the situation of our society. I think we can all agree that much has changed since 1789, whether that be the civil rights movement or the advent of streetlights. Much has changed. The Constitution is a living document, and Barack Obama, a scholar of the United States Constitution, agrees with this point. We must appoint justices who recognize the fact that our laws must reflect our society, otherwise they are not worth the paper they are printed on.
One follow-up for both, and it's really a yes or no answer. I'm interested in knowing whether either candidate believes that the Constitution guarantees a right to privacy. Is that a yes from the Republicans?
Are we answering first? I was just not
Yes.
even understanding your question. I think Senator McCain, that would be a question he would leave to the justices. My sense is his answer on that would be no. But I think that that's a question that he would leave to his justices and not try to actively interpret himself.
And just to add to that, every single legal scholar has questioned the right of privacy being in the Constitution, have criticized the Roe v. Wade decision because of that. So I think that's still very much open for debate.
Yes.
Well, this last question was first directed at the Republicans, and I want to, before we go to the audience, take the prerogative to insert another question that's inspired partly by Governor Vilsack's question about the right to privacy. Right to privacy was sort of found at the federal level within the Constitution in the Griswold v. Connecticut case some time ago, and has been expanded in various ways. And we can all agree that there are certain rights that are very clearly in the Constitution, and yet they all seem to be limited under various circumstances. So there's, of course, a right to free speech, but that's limited under certain conditions, violence and so forth, and limited based on the age of the person who's hearing certain kinds of speech. There's an implied right to vote in the Constitution, but it's an implied right and not a clear right, especially with respect to federal elections. So there are some limits even that we place on who can vote, under what conditions. Many people, I think, would argue there is a right to privacy. It certainly is there based on constitutional interpretation, whether it should be or shouldn't be. I asked earlier about whether or not health care is a right or a responsibility. And now, one thing that's particularly close to all of us in this room, and as the father of many, many children, one of whom has just gone off to college, and 6 more who will be going soon, I'm particularly interested in the right to an education. I'm very happy that my children who are not yet at college have a right to an education that's paid for by lots of other people, because our property taxes certainly don't cover the education for 7 kids in Belmont. And there's a widely varying quality of education across the country. But the limits of this education tend to be tapped out around the age of 18 or 19. So my question to the Democrats, since the Republicans got the last question, is education a fundamental right? And what are the limits of that right?
It absolutely is a right. If the United States can put a man on the moon, can find a vaccine for polio, can develop the atomic bomb, there's no limit to American ingenuity. And we must foster that ingenuity, that curiosity that has been so painfully absent the past 8 years in our executive branch. We must encourage education, and indeed, it must be a right for all of our citizens. Education is the silver bullet in American society. There's no telling what an educated populace can do, and we must give each and every American that opportunity. If we fail to do so, we are failing ourselves and future generations.
Not only is it a right, on a more pragmatic and immediate level, it's simply good public policy. In a globalizing economy, the United States can no longer afford to leave children behind in failing public schools, and it hasn't been an effect of the John McCain and George Bush policy of throwing not enough money at them and requiring that they invent their own tests and eventually progress to 100% proficiency. It's not feasible, and it hasn't helped them compete.
As a high school history teacher myself, I think that education is a right in that every single child should be able to graduate from high school knowing how to read. They should know how to add and subtract. But sadly, so many kids that I teach in a 10th grade classroom still don't know how to spell correctly, still don't know how to construct a paragraph, and that's sad. And I think that Obama, if he got his way, he will derail all the progress that we have made in last years under No Child Left Behind. John McCain believes that by 2014, every child should be able to graduate out of high school knowing how to read and write, knowing how to add and subtract. These are just basic fundamentals that we should be teaching our kids. But yet Obama, allied with the teachers' unions, have been putting a stop in the state level, in the local level, where the right of education is enshrined in many state constitutions. But the fact is that we are failing our kids. And I think that under Obama administration, we will fail to reauthorize No Child Left Behind, and the progress that we have made under a Democratic and Republican legislation, the Kennedy bill, will go down the drain.
Thank you. I have several questions already from the audience, and I'm going to take just a few more here. Thank you. In the format of these, the way we'll answer these questions will also be to give you 60 seconds to reply, and then 30 seconds to respond. And if you hear your question asked, you want to smile, let us know that it's your question, or if you want to not let us know, that's fine as well. But thank you for these questions. The question here is posed to the Republicans. And I better hope that I can read everyone's handwriting. Although the United States has the third highest corporate tax rate, the Government Accountability Office estimates that nearly 2/3 of U.S. companies do not pay any federal income taxes. In addition, the Tax Justice Center estimates that $100 billion a year of tax revenue is lost to offshore tax evasion. What will your candidate do to close tax loopholes?
Well, this is a great question. I love debating the finer points of tax policy. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But in particular, I think you'll find when Ronald Reagan decreased the corporate tax rate under his administration, what happened? Did tax revenues fall? No. In fact, they increased by a record amount. And you know why that was? Because the tax base expanded. The lower tax rates that were happening as a result of corporate taxes made it much less onerous to try to bring your company to the United States and have them pay some super high tax rate. And people had actively searched for ways to get around that, offshore accounts, loopholes, different things like that. The McCain administration, by lowering the corporate tax rate, will take advantage of that same opportunity. Lowering the corporate tax rate, incentivizing corporations to stay in this country and pay their fair share of taxes. And I think it's very important that they do that, because obviously in an American economy, businesses and individuals share the tax burden. But the fact is, if we continue to jack up the corporate rate, if we continue to jack up capital gains taxes, if we continue to jack up all of these taxes that affect the entrepreneurs and the innovators in our economy, we're going to drive them to offshore accounts, we're going to drive them to other countries, and we're ultimately going to lose their tax dollars. And if that's the only reason that you have for wanting to keep these companies here, at least that's something.
What Colin ignores is the actual tax loophole that encourages offshoring, which I'll take the liberty to explain. The way the corporate tax code works is that if a company employs people overseas through a foreign subsidiary, it pays the local tax rate, and it does not have to remit taxes to the United States government if it keeps those profits invested in the foreign subsidiary in the foreign country. What this means is that not only does the tax code encourage companies to send jobs offshore where Americans can't take them, it also encourages them to keep expanding offshore and to keep their profits invested offshore offshore instead of in the United States economy. That's the loophole that Barack Obama will close.
Thank you. All right, the next question, and no one nodded or winked that last time, is first to the Democrats. When you cast your ballot, you're voting for more than just president. You're voting for the vice president as well. How would you describe the qualifications of both your party's vice presidential candidates, your party's and of the Republican Party's vice presidential candidates?
Joe Biden is a statesman in the truest, greatest sense of the word. He has been a politician for many years, yes, but he has never been conquered by Washington lobbyists or Washington disillusionment. He is a man who has stood and fought for the middle class and the average American his entire life. And he's protected the rights of citizens. He was chairman of the Judiciary Committee and helped derail the nomination of Robert Bork to ensure that we had a judiciary that remained respected and respected the living Constitution. Joe Biden had protected helped pass the Violence Against Women Act, and put more cops on the streets. And as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Joe Biden has been a force in foreign affairs. He is respected across the world. And at the end of the day, Joe Biden is very qualified to be Vice President of the United States, which really you shouldn't look any further when the choice of Vice President is the first major decision a presidential candidate makes. It is a test of judgment. And when Barack Obama chose Joe Biden, a lifetime public servant, a servant of the people, he clearly made the right decision.
I agree with that. I think Joe Biden is one of the best Democrats that I know, and I think Barack Obama made the right choice in picking him to offset his ridiculous lack of experience. And I think that that's fortunately something that Sarah Palin does bring to the table. Do you realize Alaska, of any state in the union, deals with issues that are things you don't deal with in any other state, certainly not Delaware. She had to deal with Indian reservation relations between Indian reservations that you will deal with as president. She had to deal with negotiating an international treaty when they built the pipeline that went through Canada from Alaska down to the contiguous 48. She has executive experience. She has experience with what the real world looks like to most Americans in this country, and I think that's what's ultimately important.
Thank you. The next question toward the Republicans. One of our audience members writes, please consider some world facts. Obama's rally in Germany attracted 200,000 people. In Japan, T-shirts with his face on are sold out. Fidel Castro characterizes Barack Obama as a miracle. And in the most anti-American country of Europe, Greece, he has a fan club of over 2,000 people. Why is this? And what is it that these folks in other countries are expecting?
I think they are expecting America to lead. I know in the last 8 years we have done some things to damage our reputation around the globe. But I think John McCain has a different philosophy than the Bush doctrine. He is someone that has been in a war. He knows when to send troops, where not to send troops. That is something that he has proven time and time again. Stood up against Ronald Reagan when he decided to send troops. The fact of the matter is that we are not electing a president of the world. We are electing a president of the United States of America. Obama is preparing America to be a second-class world power. McCain is preparing America to take a more proactive and leading role in the world, whether it's making sure that we stem Middle Eastern radical terrorism, or on other issues, on promoting diplomatic ties. I think McCain has experience, and not just talk, but experience when it comes to world affairs.
Experience is no substitute for judgment, nor will it ever be an acceptable substitute for judgment. And in the question of judgment, Barack Obama has proven that he is superior to John McCain, and the people of the world respond. It's true we're not electing a president of the world, but we are electing a president on the world stage in a global community whose actions, decisions, and judgment will affect people across the globe. It's a rare thing to see the world so energized and so excited about an American president, and it is something we should be honored about. This is a historic election, and Barack Obama is a historic candidate. But beyond that, we have to see at the end of the day that his foreign policy, his approach to global problems is much more sound than John McCain because he has the judgment, he has proven it in the past, and he will continue to prove it as President of the United States.
I was given a nod that there should be one more question, but I want to actually end with an even balance between questions going to the Democrats and Republicans, so I will ask two more, also from the audience. The first one now to the Democrats. This is in the wake of the Supreme Court decision that overturned Washington, D.C.'s interpretation of the Second Amendment and their handgun ban. In Senator Obama's views, do individual Americans have a right to bear arms?
In Senator Obama's view, individual Americans have a right to bear arms as granted by the Second Amendment to the Constitution, but that right is constrained by the needs of public safety. Barack Obama recognizes that guns are fundamentally a local issue, and you and I, coming from Wisconsin, Professor King, should probably understand that there's a huge division between our cities where handguns that spread in with the crack cocaine trade in the 1980s and that continue to afflict the streets today are a severe danger, much more than they are in the rural areas where people, Sarah Palin and plenty of Democrats as well, prize the right to own a gun and cherish hunting as an important family tradition. Barack Obama recognizes that that's a local issue, and this is part of the reason that it's so important, as John talked about earlier, for a president who will appoint Supreme Court justices who understand that the Constitution is a living document. The Founding Fathers, even in all their wisdom, never could have foreseen an era in which guns had such different implications in such different local contexts, and Barack Obama will appoint judges and make policies that recognize that.
Fortunately, guns are a local issue, and I think it is important that we do look at the pragmatic implications of gun policies across the country. And I'm glad that we can both agree that the Second Amendment affords an individual right to bear arms. Unfortunately, I think that, again, Senator Obama talks out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. I think if you asked him for his honest belief, I think that the type of justices he would appoint, a la the four who voted against overturning the D.C. gun ban, which fundamentally would have violated that individual right to bear arms, he would appoint like those four justices, and I think those four justices are ones who would disagree with that premise that there is an individual right to bear arms.
Last question from the audience goes first to the Republicans. And it's a question that one could easily imagine, of course, again, like all of our others, being asked later tonight. But it's about a legacy, not Barack Obama or John McCain's legacy, but Governor George Bush's legacy. What do you think, Governor, what do you think President Bush's legacy will be, both good and bad, but with a balance of both good and bad in the president's legacy?
Well, this is an important question, and it's obviously something that I'm sure is occupying the minds of those who are in the White House today. I think without question, the positives of the Bush administration's policies are going to be numerous. The PEPFAR program to reduce AIDS and continue development in Africa has been widely praised by both ends of the aisle, and I think that's something that deserves more than lip service. It's a great program, and it's done a lot of good, literally saving millions of lives. I think additionally, what President Bush has done to expand Medicare has helped a lot of senior citizens in this country who are grateful for his efforts to do that. And I think his continued, his ability to pass through his tax cuts in his first term fortunately stands as a testament to the kind of economic growth we can encourage with low tax rates and encourage that kind of thing to continue to happen. Now, of course, I think one of the biggest stains on Bush's legacy is the terrible mismanagement of the crisis of Hurricane Katrina. That kind of executive incompetence is unbefitting of the White House, and I assure you that as president, John McCain will replace that incompetency with supreme competence as well in his ability to executively manage, and I think that that's something that you'll see change significantly between a Bush administration and the McCain administration.
To go through the number of diminishing factors in George W. Bush's legacy would take much more than the 30 seconds I'm allotted, so I'm instead going to focus on something a little different. As a scholar of American history, and especially the United States presidency, I take great joy, just as Colin enjoys debating tax policy, I love reading about the presidents. And when I look at President Bush, I see a lack of imagination. And it's this question of imagination I think will be his greatest legacy. He's a man so consumed with his own beliefs, who surrounds himself with yes men who will only agree with him. We need a president with imagination, a president who will surround himself with free thinkers who will not be afraid to disagree. Going into the 21st century with unbelievable possibilities, we need an imaginative president, one willing to admit when he is wrong and one always willing to do the right thing.
All right, thank you. I'd like to give you each 30 seconds now before we move on towards closing statements. 30 seconds to help us who may not be partisans one way or the other. As you know, most students on campus consider themselves to be independents. And you represent the Republican Club and the Harvard College Democrats, two firm camps. And it's obvious tonight that you are tremendously bright, tremendously capable, and well-grounded in your beliefs. But again, most students here, many students here are independents and can be swayed and are often turned off by partisanship and hope for bipartisanship. So I want to ask what your organization here on Harvard's campus will be doing specifically over the next 2 weeks to foster bipartisanship and a bipartisan dialogue. Either side can take that. We're going to give you 1 minute each, and either side can go first.
Well, I think actually the Republican Club, I know many of you out there probably identify more as liberal-leaning independents than anything else, since this is Cambridge after all, but I think you'll be shocked to hear, maybe if you don't know too much about the HRC, that we've done a lot of things to foster bipartisan dialogue on campus. This semester we've already brought in an inner-city Boston black Democratic minister to speak to us at our general meeting about social justice. We actually, last night had a debate between the log cabin Republicans and the Stonewall Democrats, who are the gay Democrats and gay Republicans of their respective parties. And I think we've done a lot to foster a bipartisan and issues-based discussion on campus, and we're going to continue to do that. I think one way that we can agree, both of us, that our organizations will continue to expand is through social events. It's a great way to sort of get away from the partisanship that turns people off that Professor King mentioned, and focus on what brings us together, which is an enjoyment of having fun, talking about these issues on one-on-one, and getting to know each other better as individuals at this campus and as students at Harvard. So we're definitely, we've done a lot to expand what our range of issues are that we discuss, and a lot to expand what our social opportunities are, and I look forward to continuing that in the coming weeks, along with our great campaign activities.
It has been a privilege on behalf of the board of the Harvard Dems and our membership. It has been a privilege to be engaged in precisely those activities that Colin talked about. I think this is an outstanding example of one of them, and it is wonderful and gives me great hope to know that we can have a spirited but civil dialogue here or when we run into each other in the yard. But I want to emphasize one other thing that the Harvard College Democrats are doing specifically among our members to foster bipartisanship. Because the problem is not partisanship per se, it's ideology, it's dogma, it's believing that your own beliefs are so firmly rooted in the God-given truth that you are above listening to anybody who thinks that they are, who dares to disagree. And the way that we're fixing that is by taking hundreds of people up every week to New Hampshire to knock on voters' doors and to talk to them. Because it's easy to forget when you're on Capitol Hill, when you're in Washington, when you're far away from voters, that we are bound with we are united by much more than we are divided by. And so when we bring people to have those face-to-face conversations about the issues that affect all of us, not just as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, we remind our members and we remind those voters that our destiny are fundamentally bound together.
Thank you. And we're going to move in just a moment now to closing statements. And the closing statements will be first from the Democrats, and then the final word will be from the Republicans. But I want to take a moment just to thank all of you. Thank you in the audience, and especially thank everyone who's been involved in politics on this campus over the last couple of years. I've been here for all of the presidential campaigns and involved with the IOP since 1992. So I've seen a few of these campaigns come and go. Nothing has been like this year. People were excited in 92, people were excited in 2000. Nothing has been like now. Youth turnout is surging. It was up dramatically in the primaries. We know it was up in 2006 over all relevant elections among college-age students, whether in college or not. In 2004, regardless of what you heard from the media, we had the highest youth voter turnout as a percentage of eligible voters since 1972. So there's an energy here. There's a tremendous future for everyone here in this room, and we're so happy that you're engaged in politics. You are going to be our next greatest generation, better than mine, better than my parents, and I think we have tremendous confidence in you. So thank you, and we'll close beginning with the Democrats, 3 minutes, and then 3 minutes for the Republicans.
I think it's pretty clear from the last, an hour and a half, that we have pretty strong reasons why we believe that Barack Obama is the best candidate for the future of the United States and for our generation on a host of issues ranging from engaging with our allies and our enemies alike to work towards a more secure future for the world, to providing health care to every American who wants it, to providing a stable educational foundation for people of our generation, our younger siblings, and our children, to grow on and on which to expand the economy. But I want to touch on a much broader theme that I think explains the enthusiasm that Professor King so generously described that we've seen surrounding not just this election, but in particular, Barack Obama's campaign. I think that the reason we have seen unprecedented registration among youth and among adults alike, the reason that I've run into all kinds of people, my mother's and my grandmother's age, saying that this is the single most exciting presidential campaign they've seen since Robert F. Kennedy was running for president, is because Barack Obama has built his campaign on the philosophy of politics at its best. We are joining in this movement because we recognize that politics at its best rests on the fact that as Americans, our fates are intertwined. I have the great security of my parents' health insurance coverage, but as long as 47 million people rely on emergency rooms for their health care, we're not secure enough. Here at Harvard, we're privileged to enjoy one of the best educations that the world's institutions have to offer, but as long as our public schools are failing the most disadvantaged children across the river in Boston, education in America for us and for them is incomplete. Most of you in this room can walk into a courtroom and marry any consenting adult you love, but because I'm gay in 47 states of the Union, I still can't do that. And in my book, that is an affront to the sanctity of all marriage. All of this, we are reminded of all of this when we engage in Barack Obama's campaign because, as I've been pointing out earlier, Barack Obama's campaign rests on the grassroots strategies that constituted his first foray into politics as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago many years ago. That is, that when we meet face-to-face with our neighbors, with our friends, with our fellow citizens, we look them in the eye and we recognize what unites us. We sit down and we have a civil dialogue. Everybody I've ever met in the state of New Hampshire, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, Ron Paul supporter, you name it, everybody in the state of New Hampshire I've met recognizes that. Everybody I talk to about politics when I go back home to Wisconsin recognizes that. The only people who have lost sight of what unites us and have privileged what divides us and have privileged their own petty egos are on Capitol Hill. The reason that we've seen such tremendous enthusiasm is because Barack Obama is the single candidate in this election who promises to restore what people in the streets of America have known for all their lives. That we fundamentally working together and without bickering can achieve much more than we can in a world led by John McCain and his Karl Rove tactics. And that's why I'm working for Barack Obama from now until November 4th.
And the Republican close.
You know, I yearn for those days of bygone friendliness as well. But I think that the discussion Eva just had with us really underlines the distinct difference between our two sides in this particular election. And I want to thank Eva and Jonathan for joining us. I had a really good time talking with you guys. What we're talking about tonight is a presidential election. And there is a difference between a political figure and a political leader. Barack Obama is a tremendous political figure. He represents a lot for a lot of people. He's energized the youth of this country, which is to his great credit. He's done a lot with the figureship he's been provided with, but he is distinctly not a leader. And when we are discussing who deserves to be the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, we have to go beyond door-to-door politics. We need to go beyond cooking every night in your house. You have to go beyond normal life and look at who is a transcendent leader and who can lead our country in and through some of the greatest crises we've ever faced. One of these crises is the economic crisis. We've seen home values plummet. People have lost their savings in the stock market. We've had problems dealing with things from the subprime mortgage markets to financial markets to unemployment. John McCain has substantive and leadership bold priorities on these economic issues. His home program will replace mortgages with high adjustable rates with low fixed rates, something that he came out in a debate and advocated in the second debate. He's proposed eliminating the alternative minimum tax altogether, lowering the corporate tax to encourage job creation in the United States, and reforming the government so that we don't have to deal with continued government waste that wastes the resources of our country. Senator Obama says a lot, but the fact is he's got $143,000 in campaign donations from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, third most in the United States Senate, despite the fact that he doesn't even serve on the Finance Committee. He's proposing the largest tax increase in history under his economic plan, which I've already explained to you tonight, lies when it tells you that 95% of American families will not be affected by a tax increase. There's a lot to be said for words, but there's much more to be said for actions, and unfortunately on the economy, Senator Obama's don't actions don't back up his words. The same is true in foreign policy. We face unprecedented challenges on a global scale. Senator McCain has the experience to deal with it and the judgment. He was right on the surge. The surge has worked, something that Senator Obama refuses to acknowledge. He wants to refocus our efforts on Afghanistan to ensure that we win the conflict there. And he wants to engage in sensible discussions with world leaders of both our allies and our enemies across the world. Senator Obama gives you lots of happy words, but his naivety shows through in the policies he proposes, unfortunately. Energy is another issue where Senator McCain has proposed a Lexington project, tax cuts, lots of leadership and bold ideas on this issue that will lead us past the issues of climate change. Senator Obama is a latecomer to all of this, formerly opposing nuclear energy. He has the wrong priorities, and he's shown a failure to take on the ethanol subsidies. Senator McCain is a different kind of Republican on climate change, on immigration, on bipartisan campaign finance reform, on earmarks. He's a different kind of Republican, but he's the kind of leader that we need now.
Well, the time for this debate has ended. I want to thank so much our panelists, first our debaters, of course, up here, and then Jean Inman and Emma Lind and Governor Vilsack. Thank you so much. And thank you to you and to your questions. If you can pick your things up and then plan on coming back here when the doors reopen at 8:30. It's going to be a huge event here tonight and a big event nearing the end of this campaign. Thank you to the IOP staff and everybody here. Thank you.